factor is timing.
Right.
Now, it's very interesting that oil in Kenya has been found at this stage of Kenya's development, which is a positive factor, which is neither too early nor too late in Kenya's development process. So the risk of oil washing out or drowning out the rest of the economy because of too early a discovery, as in Angola or Nigeria, is quite small. Kenya is a reasonably well-diversified economy, so discoveries, so the timing works in Kenya's favor. And the third is size. So Kenya's 600 million barrels of oil discovered so far is quite small by not just global but also regional standards, which again probably is a good thing because it reduces the oil drowning out the rest of the economy. To give you an interesting fact, if in 2012 Saudi Arabia extracted about 11.5 million barrels per day.
What?
At that rate, all of Kenya's 600 million barrels would be depleted in just 52 days.
That's true.
So location, timing, size is what makes Kenya's oil discovery special. But you asked me about the economic impact of oil. Can Kenya benefit? So even though the volume of these discoveries is small, the impact on fiscal revenues is not. And we estimate in our report that at peak production, fiscal revenues are as high or can be as high as $9 billion. And to put that in context, $9 billion would more than fully cover the cost of the SGR all the way from Mombasa to Nairobi. So the point is that the main economic impact of oil comes not from the intermediate pipeline construction or that kind of stuff, but it comes from the fiscal revenues oil generates and how well they are managed.
All right. Let's talk about the potential of services in the country today. Since 2005 or 2006, financial services, trade and transport, as well as ICT has been going up. In fact, your report says that it has gone up or at least increased by 50%. How do we take advantage of this to even further grow the economy?
Right. So economists tend to divide up the economy in three parts: industry, agriculture, and services. Now, industry, and I'm going to use manufacturing as a shorthand for industry.
Yes.
So manufacturing has been stagnating despite efforts to revive it. It hasn't been more than 10 to 11% of the economy over the last decade. Agriculture, even though it's about a quarter of the economy, well, we just discussed it, it's in terms of actual growth contribution is not much.
It is stagnated.
So that leaves services, and services we discover have emerged as a star performer over the last decade. So they are over half of the economy now. And let me take you back to the 2008 election crisis period. There, industrial output, it fell. Agricultural output, it fell. What grew? Services. So services are also very resilient.
Right.
So they're growing fast, they are resilient, and over half of Kenya's exports, either this year or by next year, will be services driven, not goods driven. So services are the main engine of growth. And I do want to make a distinction though between modern services and traditional services.
Yes.
So modern services are the services you referred to, banking, ICT, finance, insurance, basically that have been built on this mobile money platform. And those are the most productive ones. So far, I would say, so good. Kenya is doing extremely well on the modern services front. In fact, another report that we launched last month, which is our flagship World Bank Group Development Report, we call it the World Development Report. So that pointed out, that singled out Kenya as an example of digital services. So in other words, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Modern services are doing well.
All right. And also, in about a few weeks' time, you're going to be giving us a report on Kenya's six-month performance. But do you think that this is going to reflect Kenya in better light, especially for the sectors that have been indicated as having stagnated over the past decade?
Right. Well, you'll have to wait for the report to be released for that one. But I do want to make a distinction between 6 monthly updates and this report that we launched. So the 6 monthly reports are updates. So what has happened in the economy since the last 6 months. this report that we just talked about or are talking about takes a step back and takes a look at a longer term perspective. So questions such as, well, where will growth come from? How have these sectors performed traditionally in the past? So it may well be that next month when we launch our Kenya economic update, that manufacturing may have done very well.
Yeah.
But again, taking a step back, looking at a longer perspective, manufacturing is not doing that well.
It's not doing that well.
Yeah.
All right. And, you know, just before we can even get into the fact that you talked about the key drivers, that is innovation, oil, and the third one that you mentioned, urbanization, exactly, as being the key drivers, let's for a minute talk about the low productivity jobs. You know, low productivity jobs, I should say, could also be categorized as being informal jobs in the country today. So do you think that the informal sector is not empowered enough in Kenya to be able to do what they're supposed to be doing with higher productivity levels?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So when we launched our report yesterday, that generated a lot of debate. Now, I can understand it from some people's perspective. They want informal to become formal.
Yes.
But in our report, we take a firm stand that informal is the new normal. And the real gains to the economy really come from improving productivity in the informal sector. So informality is not something to run away from. Informality is really to be embraced because, as you said, the bulk of job creation is in the informal sector. So how do you increase productivity in the informal sector and hence create more jobs?
Right.
And we propose a two-pronged approach in the report. One is by leveraging the mobile money platform to provide market information such as prices and market opportunities, especially in rural areas. So iCow, I don't know if you've heard of iCow.
Yes,
that's one example. And the second approach we take is providing the right kind of training and experience, and the emphasis being on the right kind. So on that front, we require much more experimentation with apprenticeships, vouchers, targeted skill building programs, but we make the point that such programs have to be flexible. So if you're a Jua Kali worker, it's going to be very difficult for you to take time off during the day and attend a training program. So this one small example of flexibility.
All right. So how do we bring, you know, just like you say, it's going to be difficult for anyone to attend an apprentice program if you are in the informal sector. But then again, how do we even come to close to formalizing the informal sector? Or do we just deal with it? Informal is the new normal, and so just roll with some of the services that are already existent.
Right. So this leads us to an interesting question on how much do we even know about informality?
Yes.
And we all have our own anecdotal experiences, of course, but looking at the numbers, and these come from a recent World Bank informality survey, we find a few interesting things about informality. First is that informal youngs are young. Informality in Kenya is young in the sense that most informal firms started in 2002, and this stems from the liberalization of lending that generated a lot of Jua Kali activity. The second is informality is small. Over 3 out of 4 informal firms we surveyed hire only one worker. And any guess who that is? It's themselves, the owner. Okay, so 3 out of 4 firms are owner-operated informal firms. And the third one is that the two main reasons for informality are business registration procedures and taxes. So in the report, we take a stand again that informality, you shouldn't force firms, informal firms into formality. So improve the business environment, improve the tax regime, provide, again, targeted skill building programs. And interestingly, in the survey, we also found that over half of the firms surveyed, and the single ownership firms, they were aware of the benefits of formality. Now there's this sort of feeling out there, oh, look at these informal firms, they are not part of the tax net and they are free riding. That may be true to some extent, but there's also costs of remaining informal. For example, informal firms are not formally able to access the public court system. Informal firms cannot get access to formal finance. So it's not that informal firms want to remain formal just to escape and things like that. There are pros and cons, So if we can increase the benefits by general improvement of the business environment, of the tax registry, of the tax system, that will help.
All right. And earlier you talked about oil as being one of the key drivers, but let's talk about the other two, innovation and urbanization. How do we leverage on this to achieve shared prosperity?
Right. So I spoke about IOU. We discussed O, which is oil. Let's talk about I. Now again, we all have our own anecdotal experience of how entrepreneurial Kenyan society is, and it definitely is. But we found some surprising results in our report, and these are based on a survey, an innovation survey of about 550 firms, manufacturing firms, services firms, and these are surprising because they go against the grain of Kenya being a hotbed of innovation. And I'll just share a few findings on innovation. So first is that innovation in Kenya is incremental. What do I mean by that? Well, only 12% of the firms, of Kenyan firms, actually produce something that is new to the domestic market. And that's a tiny amount. The bulk of the, about 90% or 88% of the firms, the innovation is very on the margin. It's very incremental. So they could take the pen that you're holding, change the color from red to yellow, and that's innovation for them. But true radical innovation, it's tiny, it's incremental. That's number one. Second is that we find that innovation is small, in the sense that very few firms, only 1 out of 4 firms, actually invest in or spend in in-house research and development. So if you're not innovate, well, how are you going to stay alive in this increasingly competitive world? However, only about 3% of these firms purchase technology transferring solutions from abroad, such as licenses, patents, and trademarks. So that's a surprising finding too.
Right.
The silver lining in all of this is that managerial capacity in these firms in Kenya tends to be higher than in other peer countries, but still below the managerial frontier of middle-income countries and the truly innovative countries. So to answer your question on the I of innovation, well, how do we make the most out of innovation? We make the most out of innovation by making sure that it remains less incremental, it grows bigger, and we leverage on this latent pool of managerial capacity.
Right.
One final point on innovation, which came up in yesterday's discussion, and it's generated a lot of debate and discussion, by the way. Because again, instinctively, we are, I think, hardwired to think of Kenya as an innovative society. The last big innovation, as one of our panelists yesterday, that came out of Kenya was M-Pesa. Now, how long back was that, Joy? It wasn't
9
yesterday?
years ago.
8 to 9 years ago. So what's the next big innovation?
So you think that we're probably not reinventing the wheel, we're just going with what is already existent. And just like you said, just, you know, looking at this pen and turning it into a yellow instead of red, and we call that innovation. So there's not really much that is driving the innovation sector. Well, thank you so much, Apurva Sangi, who is the lead economist at World Bank Kenya. It was an honor speaking to you
Absolutely, Joy.
about Kenya's economic growth.